What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Wanted to come to you guys today and talk to you about something that we see a lot of people struggling with on a lot of the RV forums. A lot of people ask questions about it, and the answers they get are all over the map. So that question is, what battery should I use in my RV? Can I add a battery to my RV? Most RVs, fifth wheels travel trailers, are going to come with a single battery. A lot of people want to know if they can add an extra battery to give them a little more run time on some of their 12 volt accessories inside the RV, and the answer is you absolutely can. Some people recommend going to 6 volts, and that's another great option, but you do have to wire them a little different than you do 12 volt batteries. So just want to kind of give you guys an overview, just so you have some knowledge. If you're going to buy batteries for your RV, this is not going to be a super technical, we're not going to get into lithium because I don't have a lot of experience with lithium. Not something I'm interested in getting into right now. I just don't have enough knowledge to speak about it. We're going to talk about regular flooded wet batteries, and we're going to talk about AGM batteries. So a real quick background, my experience with batteries. I was in the battery industry for 14 years. I managed a battery store down on the Treasure Coast, South Florida, that was considered the go-to place to get your automotive, marine, commercial heavy-duty batteries. We installed batteries on everything from RVs up to 100-plus foot motor yachts, sport fish yachts. We did a tremendous amount of work on those, and the battery systems on a yacht, on a large boat like that, are very, very similar to that in an RV. There's a lot of crossover there. The first thing we're going to talk about is the most common battery out there, the most inexpensive battery out there, and that is the regular flooded deep cycle battery. So most RV dealerships are going to use the very, very, very cheapest battery that they can get their hands on. They're not interested in quality. Now I'm speaking generally. There may be some out there that are different, but for the most part, they're not really interested in putting a real high quality battery in there for you. They're interested in the one that they can get their hands on, for 50 or 60 bucks and get it in there to get you out the door. That battery is not going to have a lot of reserve capacity. It's not going to have a lot of run time, so it will work. But if you plan on being unhooked from shore power and running things overnight, like your refrigerator or any lights or anything like that, the batteries are probably going to be pretty dead by the next morning. While we're talking about inexpensive batteries, there are a lot of different steps when it comes to battery quality. For example, our Reflection fifth wheel came with a Group 24 size battery. Okay, the group size just refers to the physical size of that battery. It doesn't have anything to do with the reserve capacity, the run time, cranking it, nothing. Strictly talks about the physical size of the battery. So you can have a Group 24 that may only be 60 minutes of reserve capacity, very, very light. And then you can have Group 24 that may be like 75 or 80 minutes of reserve capacity, even though it's physically the same size. So if you're going to add another battery to your RV, if you have one 12 volt battery, you want to add an extra one in there, you're going to want to make sure that those batteries are not only the same physical size, but the same capacity. You want them to match. So you're either going to need to match the battery that's in there, or buy actually 2 batteries. And the reason for that is a lighter battery, a battery with less reserve capacity, has less material inside of it. It has less lead plates inside of it. And that battery is going to require a different charge time than a heavy duty version of that same size battery. So you're going to have unequal charging rates on those batteries as they're being charged. They're not going to charge up equally, and it's going to lead to one of those batteries failing early. So once you've got 2 identical batteries, whatever size they are, So whether it's a group 24, a group 27, a group 31, we're talking about 12 volt batteries right now. You're going to have to wire those batteries together. So the way you're going to put them together is called wiring them in parallel. So parallel is when you hook positive from one battery to positive of the next battery, and negative of one battery to negative on the next battery, and then you make your connections at the end. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I've got two 12 volt group 31 batteries. Now these are very similar to the batteries that we have in our rig. This is a flooded wet battery. So this battery is not an AGM. It's flooded. It's got liquid. It's got liquid acid inside of it. So when you wire these together, you're going to go positive to positive, negative to negative, and then you're going to hook your main connections on your RV to the end. So what I like to use for these, and what I use in our rig, which really works out, these are made by Quick Cable. I will leave a link in the description for these so you guys can see what they are and get a price on them. But this is a 2-aught jumper that Quick Cable makes strictly for group 31 size batteries. So you can see they're pre-cut, so they fit right over the studs, perfect. And then it gives you an extra stud on the end to actually hook your main connection to. It has caps, so that once you bolt these down, you can cover it, keep them safe. So super good setup. I've been very, very happy with these in our rig, these jumpers. But you can do it even with a standard jumper. Now this is a golf cart jumper, so you would want something that was a little heavier than this, but you can do it with just a single jumper. You can jump positive to positive and then just make your main connection on one battery. So when you go positive to positive, negative to negative, that basically turns this into one big 12 volt battery. Okay, so this battery has 195 minutes of reserve, so by hooking two of them together in parallel, that doubles the capacity. It stays 12 volts, but it doubles the capacity of the batteries. So that takes you to 390 minutes of reserve versus 195 just for one battery by itself. These are actually commercial heavy-duty Group 31s. These are not necessarily a true deep cycle battery, but this is what we would install on a lot of the Viking sport fish yachts and a lot of the large yachts. They actually use these even for their house batteries. The commercial batteries are very heavy-duty. They have a high reserve capacity, and they have a lot of cranking amps. In an RV, you're not concerned about the cranking amps. In a fifth wheel or travel trailer RV, you're not concerned about cranking amps anyway. So you could actually use commercial Group 31s for house batteries. You're going to have excellent luck with them. Like I said, you know, I mean, if Viking is putting them on sport fish yachts that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, they got to be doing something right. So we used them. We had excellent luck with them. The sport fish yachts put a pretty good, quite a bit of abuse on the batteries, and we would see typically between 2 to 3 years out of a set of commercial Group 31s on the house battery side on those big yachts. So it's a good option. You could always go with, if you have smaller batteries, then you would want to go with like a deep cycle Group 27, a deep cycle Group 24. The main thing is they need to match. Like we discussed earlier, they have to be the same capacity, a matching set of batteries. Now, you can hook as many batteries as you want in parallel. So if we had 3 batteries, then we could put 3, and then we would triple our capacity. 4 would quadruple the capacity. And as long as you hook them in parallel, hook all the positives together and all the negatives together, that system is going to stay 12 volts. So when you check the voltage on the last battery, you're still going to have 12 volts, but you're going to have 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the capacity that you would normally have. So that is hooking batteries in parallel. Now we'll talk about what you have to do to put 6 volts in your rig and make those work. So 6 volt batteries, golf cart batteries, are also a really good option because they are a true deep cycle battery. They're typically really high capacity. The plates are thick. They hold up very, very well to that constant discharge and recharge. So if you're off-grid camping a lot, 6-volt batteries are going to hold up and give you probably a little more runtime and probably a little bit more longevity over the life of the battery. But you do have to hook them up a little bit differently than you do the 12-volt batteries, because ultimately you need to end up where you hook your main connections from your RV needs to be 12 volts. So you have to wire them appropriately so that you get 12 volts where you hook your main connections up at the RV. The way you're going to do that is you're going to wire the 6-volt batteries in series. So you can see we have our pair of 6 volts here. So the way I've got these oriented, I've got the positive here and the negative here. So what we basically want to do is take these two 6-volt batteries and turn them into one big 12-volt battery. And the way we're going to do that, so we're going to take a jumper. Again, this is a golf cart jumper. This is all I really had access to. I would recommend, this is a 6-gauge jumper. I would recommend going with at least a 4-gauge, but even thicker than that would be better. The thicker the better. A thicker wire is going to mean less resistance and less heat buildup when you're drawing and recharging these batteries. If you go -1 battery, positive on the second battery, now we've connected them in series. So now if we took our voltmeter and checked our main positive and our main negative where our leads are going to go from the RV, we would get a 12-volt reading. So now what we've done is turn these two 6-volt batteries into one 12-volt battery. So when you wire batteries in series, the voltage doubles, but the capacity, the amp hour rating, stays the same. So we've taken one 6-volt 220 amp hour battery and turned it into one 12-volt 220 amp hour battery. Now that's pretty simple, a pretty simple setup if you're just doing two. If you start to get into doing a bigger battery bank, so you're not going to be able to add just a third battery if you do 6 volts. You would have to add them in pairs because you always need to have 12 volts at your main connections to your RV. So we would have to wire these in series and in parallel. That gets to be a little more complicated. You have to have more jumpers, but essentially you're doing the same thing. You would put your next pair of batteries, you would wire them just like this. You would go positive, negative, and you would turn this pair of batteries into a 12 volt, and then you would have to wire that set of batteries in parallel with this set of batteries. So it starts to get a little complicated as you add a larger battery bank with 6 volts. With 12 volts, it's very straightforward to put a bigger battery bank. You just connect all the positives, all the negatives, and you're good to go. So 6 volts does get slightly more complicated when you try to put a larger battery bank in, but there's a ton of diagrams out there that you can find on Google that will show you exactly how to wire it. But it's just a little more complicated. Both of these batteries that we have are flooded lead acid batteries. Like I said, that's the most inexpensive battery. It's going to be the cheapest option, but it's not necessarily the best option. Flooded batteries are great, number one, because they are low cost, but they do require maintenance. Anytime you're going to put them in a deep cycle application where you're drawing them down and recharging them, they're going to use water. There's no way around it, and I don't care if it's a maintenance-free battery. These interstates are maintenance-free, but if we were to put these in a deep cycle application like in the RV, they will 100% use water from the discharge and recharge process. Anytime you charge a battery, you create heat inside that battery, and that heat will cause that water to evaporate off over time. How fast that happens depends on how you use your batteries. If you discharge your batteries way down, if you're off-grid camping a lot and you're really draining those batteries down and really hitting them hard to charge them all the way back up, then that's going to use more water. If you rarely ever camp off-grid, just every now and then, and when you do, your batteries don't really get extremely discharged and you're just kind of topping them up, keeping them maintained, those batteries may use just a minute amount of water. You could probably go 6-8 months without ever checking the water and be fine. If you have flooded lead acid batteries in your rig, you really need to check them every month to 2 months in the beginning so that you can get an idea of your water usage and then you can kind of adjust from there. If you check them after a month and you don't have to add any, then you can stretch that out a little bit longer next time. But you definitely need to be checking the water because they will use water, and if you never check them, you're not going to know they're bad until you go to drop your jacks or use some lights inside and the battery's shot. It's not going to give you a whole lot of warning once they run out of water and they go bad. So we try to stay away from maintenance-free flooded batteries in deep cycle applications if we can, but again, that's kind of dependent on how hard you're using the rig. But ideally, if it's a flooded battery, you want to be able to get in there and check the water. So when you check the water, I've got a 6-volt battery here, not a real one. I'm not that strong. So there's a lip, you probably can't see on the video, but if I stick my finger down there, I've got a lip that goes down about 1.5 inches inside the battery. All you want to do is fill the water up to the bottom of that lip, and then leave the remainder. The remainder of that space is so that when your battery charges and that liquid expands inside the battery, it has room and doesn't push out the caps, make a big mess, and corrode everything. So don't overfill the batteries, just fill it up to the lip. There's a lip that sticks down in every single battery, up to the bottom of the lip, and you're good. You don't have to come all the way to the very tip top. So that also means that when you install these, they have to be in a location where you can access them to check the water. So if you're wanting to install some batteries in a location where you either don't want to worry about checking the water, or you can't access them to check the water, AGM is going to be the way to go. The benefit of an AGM battery, you're going to get a higher capacity. They typically have more reserve capacity than a standard wet battery will, and they're also going to last longer. They're going to give you more longevity. So the principles of how we wired them are all the same, whether it's flooded or AGM. Nothing's going to change the way you wire those batteries up. If you go with something like a pure lead, like I have North Stars in our trailer, North Star, Odyssey, a thin plate pure lead battery, benefit of those, higher capacity than even a standard AGM battery. They're going to recharge much faster because of the way that battery is constructed. Compressing those plates together drives the internal resistance of that battery down so that it accepts the charge faster. It can accept more amperage. You can discharge those things way down, and they have no problem with being hit with a high amperage to boost them right on back up. So AGMs are definitely really the way to go. You can find some pretty good deals on AGM batteries, and if you never want to have to hassle with worrying about checking the water, if you want something you can install and know that you're going to be good to go for probably 4 years at least, then AGM is definitely the way you want to go. AGM batteries are also going to prevent a lot of corrosion. With wet batteries, anytime they charge, they do gas a little bit, so you get some corrosive gases that come out of them, and that's going to cause corrosion on your terminals if you don't keep up with it. You got to make sure to keep the terminals clean. AGMs kind of eliminate a lot of that issue. So a lot of benefits with AGM batteries. I've got them in ours. We really recommended those to people in the marine industry. Back when I worked at the battery store, managed the battery shop down south, really tried to switch people over to AGMs, and nobody that we switched over to AGM from wet batteries was ever disappointed. They were very, very happy with the performance and the life they got out of them. And the marine environment is very, very, very abusive on batteries. So if it holds up to that environment, it's going to hold up in your RV, perfect. So the last thing we're going to touch on about the batteries is how they need to be charged. Because putting a giant battery bank in your RV is fantastic. It'll get you a ton of runtime, but if you can't recharge it, then it does you no good. It's going to damage the batteries, you're going to fail early, and you're going to spend a lot of money to find out that you've got a bunch of bad batteries because you didn't recharge them properly. If we're charging AGMs or wet batteries, either one, the recommendation of charging amperage is going to be at least 10% of whatever the capacity of your battery bank is. So break that down a little more simple. If your battery bank is a 200 amp hour battery bank, then you want your charger to be able to charge at least 20 amps. Deep cycle batteries They like a higher amperage charge. They need a higher amperage charge. If you trickle charge them, what happens is those batteries never get to 100%. So there's a lot of myths and a lot of misconceptions about the proper way to charge a deep cycle battery. If I were to charge these 6 volts or even this one 12 volt on a 2 amp trickle charger, eventually the voltage would come up and it would show charged. But that battery has not actually had the amp hour capacity put back into it. So what would happen is it would basically end up being basically a surface charge. So those batteries would appear charged with a meter, but as soon as we turned on an accessory or tried to run something on them, they would drain off very quickly. So trickle charging those batteries, big deep cycle batteries, is not the best way to take care of them. And what will happen is, since they never get to 100% charge, they're going to sulfate faster, and sulfation is what eventually kills a lead acid battery. So if you charge them at least 10% of the whole capacity of your bank, then you're going to eliminate that sulfation from forming. You're going to charge them fully charged every time, and a fully charged battery is a much, much happier battery than one that's only charged to 75 or 80% all the time. So, you know, again, that's something we used to see so much in the marine industry, is people would have, you know, a trolling motor is a great example because it's a constant draw. It's a constant draw on those batteries, and they would take their boat out, they would fish all day long, run the trolling motor, take their battery down to where it was completely dead, you know, 11 volts, 10.5, 11 volts. Then they would go home, they'd throw it on their little 2 amp or 6 amp trickle charger, and they'd go out next time and trolling motor didn't last as long. And then it was kind of a progressive thing. You would see less and less and less and less and less runtime until the battery was so sulfated that it wouldn't even accept the charge, it was just shot. Very, very common thing to see in the marine industry, and it's also very common to see that in the RV industry as well, because a lot of the converters that are built into the RVs are designed to charge just a single battery that came in the RV. They don't really factor in the fact that, you know, you might add 2 or 3 or 4 batteries and then try to charge them on that same converter. So the way we got around that is we put a Victron 25 amp charger into our rig. So I'll leave it plugged in. Whenever we're plugged into power, that charger kicks on, it hits our 2 batteries, charges them up very, very quickly, takes really good care of them in float mode. It even has a storage mode, so that once the batteries are fully charged and it stays in float mode and it knows that nothing's being drawn off those batteries, it goes into storage mode, which is even lower than the float mode on the charger, just to keep those batteries topped off and full while they're not in use. And as soon as we use something 12 volt or something runs on the 12 volt side, then it'll kick into a different mode and bring the batteries back up. So I've been very, very happy with the Victron charger. Bluetooth, so I can see exactly what's going on with it all the time. You can change the settings on the app. It's been a very, very good product, and very, very happy with it. So the bottom line is, make sure you're charging the batteries correctly. Make sure you're maintaining your batteries correctly. You know, if they're flooded, make sure you're checking the water. You're going to save yourself so much headache. You'll really save yourself a lot of headache if you just go ahead, spend the money up front, buy some AGMs and put in there, whether that's 12 volt, whether that's 6 volts. Even if you just have a single battery and no interest in adding additional batteries, you can still upgrade to an AGM, and it's an investment that you're going to spend money on up front, but to not have to worry about your battery for 4 years, I mean, that's you know, that kind of peace of mind is well worth whatever that battery costs up front. I tried not to make this too confusing. I know that it does kind of get a little bit overwhelming when you're talking about wiring batteries in series and parallel, but if you have a good battery store around where you're at, you know, somebody there should be knowledgeable enough to help you work this out. If not, feel free to ask us in the comments. I have no problem answering battery questions for people. Like I said, I did it for 14 years. I really, really enjoyed being in the battery industry. I enjoy what we did down in South Florida on all the yachts and the RVs and everything down there. You know, so enjoyed just helping people get their problems figured out. So if you're confused about anything, or if something I said didn't make sense, or I wasn't real clear, by all means, feel free to ask, and I will gladly answer anybody's questions about batteries. And if I don't know the answer, then I will try to maybe direct you to a resource to where you can find the answer. There's enough things to worry about on an RV without worrying about your batteries all the time and whether they're good or bad, or they're going to be dead when you get to your destination. You can't, get your trailer off your truck. I mean, so batteries shouldn't be a concern. It's really not that complicated, but a lot of people try to make it complicated. So appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to drop any questions in the comments below. We'll catch you guys down the road.